Good morning, ladies and gents. So, let's get started. You'll notice that I already have a bit of a tavern coming together. It's taking some work, and you can see there are a lot of lights in the scene that I want to bake into place eventually. But we're getting there. It'll hopefully be large enough that I can have the second floor kind of stacked onto it and have it not look terribly silly. Also, the dog is starting to make noise. And the moment I go quiet so that you guys can hear it, he stops as well. I'm pretty sure he's just making noise about the heater, but still. Dog, really? I have a good microphone, so I don't know why, but you guys tend to be able to hear all kinds of stuff that I might not otherwise want you to hear. I really wish I could turn things off in the 3D scene without actually having them disappear. But yeah, so it's coming together. It's taking a little work, but it's getting there. The nice thing is all the lighting is at least only at night. So it takes... Ooh, hello. No reference exception. I've been messing with things lately, and when I mess with things, of course, that tends to break other things. Ugh. We'll see. I'm curious what is causing trouble now. It's probably some reference to something that I completely forgot. Time ref. Ah, yeah, okay. The party needs access to... Where was that, actually? Party... It's gotta be pretty far down in the references section. There it is, though. Skydome. Go. Also, okay, you have all the player characters, though. Somehow. So I don't need to re-add that. Try this again. There we go. Now I can make time go a bit faster. I can mostly walk right up to the door at this point. It takes a little bit of work, and I can't get through the door. That's the hard part. I haven't done that yet. That's next. I'm waiting for it. Any second now. There's the moon. Ah, and there's the lights. So the lights come up throughout about 10 seconds or so the moment sunset hits. And that's kind of the timing I like. The problem is if you're doing something like using... if you're resting, then that 10 seconds, it might actually be dark for a little while, which I'm not a huge fan of. But you can see that the area's not terribly well lit, but not poorly lit either. Also, I just realized that I only come up to about the doorknobs on this place, which is kind of funny. Either this place is monstrous or my party is tiny. Regardless of what the answer to that is, I probably should shrink the place down somewhat. I was kind of hoping that that would just be the right scale off the bat, and that would be it. Although, then again, if you look at the trees and the height of this building as opposed to the trees, the two don't look like they're in the same scale. This is kind of what you see when you work with, like, wargaming miniatures. You see, like, a tree and a guy who's almost as tall as the tree because the two just aren't in the same scale. It's difficult to get everything cleaned up like that sometimes. Let's see here. Let's see if we can do a quick fix on this. I don't want to spend a ton of time on it this morning. Oh, those are the prefabs. I actually want to go into the models themselves. And where the models are getting imported, I want to size them down there so there aren't any weird transforms going on inside of my own prefabs. So all these, let's see. Also, the other thing is, I don't need read and write enabled because I don't need access to any of the vertices, and that actually speeds things up a little bit. It's less information that needs to get passed around. Generate light map UVs. Interesting. Okay. And yes, apply that. And now my building's going to look real funny after these re-imports, so... Yeah, I thought so. No rig, no animations. We don't even want to bother with that part of the process. And while it takes a little bit of time now to get this all set up, it will hopefully clean things up for later. I also can't help but notice that the doors and windows are all the wrong size as well. So let's just fix that as well, because you'll note the door in the frame is actually still monstrous in comparison to the rest of it. What? Did I just not get the one piece of wall that happens to have the door in it? That seems really silly. Nope, here's the door. Here's door pieces, at least. We don't want to import blend shapes either. That's kind of a bit of a waste, because there aren't blend shapes attached to this. Obviously, I'm going to have to go through and clean a lot of this up after the fact. For now, I'm just going to fix the doors just to get the height correct on that, and then I'll go through and fix up the rest of the tavern on my own time. Content is not something I want to spend the stream messing with. Eventually, I'll have to definitely start doing that, but for now... Okay, that door looks already a lot closer to my height. Yeah. The fact that the doorknob comes up just kind of... it's just above it. It actually makes me think that it's still a little large. But if you look at the window height as well, the hole for the window, not the window itself, which is out of place, things seem a lot better in here already. Versus if I wander over to the building over here, you'll note that things are kind of the right size and shape, but that's because they're stuck into the floor and ceiling. Kind of goes to show that issue with scaling needs to get handled. Also, it looks like the material for the fire got messed with, so I'll have to do some more cleanup on that too. I've just kind of been slapping things into place for now, just to get a feel for what the place should be like, and then handling it after the fact. Anyway. So, content like that aside, what I wanted to poke at today, I actually had a few ideas of what I wanted to poke at. Because we've already got one condition in place. I kind of wanted to get a bunch more conditions slapped in. The problem is they have a lot of different effects and can do some crazy stuff. So I'm not entirely certain that I want to do all of them, but I know some of them I might be able to do. I'm actually going to pull up my Google Doc that I store everything inside. It also helps so that I can work on this at work quietly during lunch. I can sit there and type away on my Google Doc if I want to, like, make modifications to things or mess with story ideas. It's helpful for stuff like that. Let's see here. Ooh, also character creation is on the list of things that are coming up very soon that I'll need to handle. Mostly because it's just something that would be nice to have done. Sorry, it just... Interesting. That door looks just poorly sized enough now that it doesn't quite fit in the frame. There we go. You don't want any huge gaps like this sitting in your 3D models. Because the moment a player walks up and goes, hey, I can see through it, it kind of ruins a little bit of it. One of those things about having nice high quality assets is people expect things to look nice and to work well. There we go. Fix the doors. At the very least, I have working doors. If I can say nothing else. My doors fit the door frame. Ta-da. Alright, so let's see here. Okay, so my other conditions I had, right? We've got asleep, which is kind of partially installed and partially not. That one I probably need to go through and refine. And that's a very logic-heavy one, so that I wouldn't be too against refining the logic right now. Insanity is that's a difficult one, really. Picking random targets and attacking random people is kind of not a hard thing to do, but it's definitely something I haven't done yet. We've got Nauseated in. I also want to have Nauseated mess with your skill checks. Like I said, I want to make it a pain in the ass to have, but not life-threatening in any way. So like -1 or -2 on your skill checks, just enough to make it a complete nuisance all the time. Blind is also going to be one of those, like, this could be really, really bad if it happens, but shouldn't be deadly otherwise. Encumbered. That one's a little less difficult, if only because we're talking about the weight of things in our inventory, and only when our inventory changes do we really ever worry about that. Poisoned is the hardest one, because poison needs ties all over the place. Anytime you do anything that has time pass, poison should be there ticking off damage very slowly. And Diseased and Turned to Stone, I actually haven't decided what I want to do for the effects on those. Voltifer asking what was the motivation behind using Unity instead of Unreal. Executron's got it right. I mean, I work with Unity at work, and I just am a lot more familiar with it, so I know how the systems in here work. Unreal, actually, I would love to get to know, but it's one of those things where each time you learn a new engine or system, it takes a long time to get proficient with that system. And I don't want to spend a ton of time doing that. I just want to make games. That's all I want to do. Lemony Fresh just assumed the door had been damaged from a brawl and didn't hang perfect anymore. Yeah, maybe, but this is a nice tavern in a little town, so we really don't want this thing to look like it's been through hell and back. That's going to be for the second town. So essentially, the scene setup I have is first town, forest, second town, dungeon, finale. Hopefully that won't be too much for me. I'm trying to pick a low number of scenes to make sure that whatever I do, that the scenes don't really mess with me a ton in terms of the amount of work. It should just be assets required to get it working, and everything else should kind of fall into place, hopefully. Okay, so asset list aside, and trying to get more of these installed, I think... I didn't really plan a ton about what I wanted to do this morning. I had like a bunch of ideas of things I wanted to get done, but not really any like idea of, oh man, I should totally do this. So, while I'm thinking, I've got this list of assets, and if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer what I can. I know I haven't dove into any code yet that might seem silly, but I will definitely get to code today. If only to clean up... I think what I want to do today is clean up the asleep state, get it working correctly, because right now there is no working correctly on that. Interesting. Okay, so in the Scratch folder, I've already picked out my icons, so you guys won't watch me dig through these a million times more for what I'm hunting for. I know exactly the ones I want. So I got Sleepy, and I love how they all look blank, so that's not even going to help me there. Let's create a new folder for these. Just so that they're not... There's going to be a lot of them, and if I don't create a new folder for them, they're going to start polluting the existing folders. So there's Sleepy. And once again, the moment I set these to use any kind of alpha, obviously the image becomes apparent, but in the meantime, you'll have to take my word on the fact that some of these exist. Oh, wow. Okay, so some of these do work straight out. Excuse me. Delighted is for insane, by the way. That's what insanity is going to look like. You know, stars in their eyes and a creepy smile. Here's our blind. Crap. Back pain. You are going to be my encumbered. I don't know if I want a fear effect yet. I'm gonna dump the texture in here just in case, because I picked one out more than anything else. But I eventually would like to maybe have a fear effect that causes somebody to sit there and just quake in fear while, you know, the rest of the party fights. And they might be really good at, you know, dodging and staying out of the way, but they'll be pretty useless in terms of the fight itself. Alright, so we want all these to be set to sprite. We want none of these to have mip maps turned on because mip maps are a little silly. And we want all of them to be set to about... I'm going to use 128 by 128 right now, even though that is way too large for all of these, because I'm happy having a overly sized texture that then gets sized down than I am to have a crappy little texture get sized up. Having more detail is always going to be better than having less detail, obviously. Although at the end of the day, in a perfect place, obviously I would love to have all of mine be correctly sized instead of all over the place. Okay, get all these in here real quick. Can I do... No, I can't do that all at once. Oh well. Adjustments. Okay, it's Control-Shift-I. Cool. I just want these all to be the same color, so that they all look right when I'm messing with them in the scene. And because white textures can be tinted, black textures cannot. There's a big reason I like to use grayscale or white textures when I can, because that keeps me from having to retint textures manually. All I have to do is dump it into the scene and tell it, actually, this is this color, by the way, and you should know that. Alright, I do wish I had a 2D like UI view that just snapped me out here. It pulled the camera back, snapped everything in place, and made it look nice for me instead of having to, like, you could probably hear the grinding of my my mouse wheel as I roll out and zoom out and zoom out. If I'd use it Unreal, would I use blueprints or code only? I'd probably use a mixture of the two, honestly. Blueprints are great for high-level code. That's the one thing that they can do, is the flow of certain things. So stuff that I would use a coroutine for in Unity, I would probably want to use blueprints for in Unreal. So what it essentially would look like is I would make high-level functions that I can call from blueprints, and then you just have each of those functions getting called in blueprints in the right place. So, for example, if we looked at combat, we'd see for each person's turn, and we'd see a loop inside of blueprints. And then you'd see get the person, pick out their activity, do their activity, go back into the loop, wash, rinse, repeat until that's done. And that would probably be something that sits in a nice chunk inside blueprints. But then when you look at what the actual attack activity does, that's when you go into code and say, okay, we're going to have the attack activity that has sword swings and that crap attached to it. Or we're going to use the spell activity that, you know, attacks with spells and generates all these objects and does neat things with it. Because otherwise, if we don't have anything that is main game loop sitting in blueprints, it's going to get messy really quick. So I'd probably use a mixture of the two. I'm not a huge fan of trying to pick one tool and just, like, stick to my guns. Mostly because obviously all tools are good at all kinds of different things. There we go. I'm trying to get this thing over the character. Enough, at least, that he doesn't look like a complete goof when we work on some of this stuff. There we go. That looks like a good placement for this. 128 is probably not going to be enough. I think it's 200. Yeah, 200 is the same. And actually what we could do instead of using a width of 200 is we could set our anchors so that the two just always match. And I think I like that better. I think it works out better that way. When I try and use anchors. Obviously that doesn't always work, but anchors are great for situations like this where I have one piece of UI and I want another piece of UI that I always want to match. So whenever I change the width of one, I want the other one to change to match. That's what anchors are great for. They may have some shortcomings when it comes to initialization and attempting to get details of them, but otherwise they actually work out very well for me. And now nauseated is way too high. So we need to fix that. In fact, let's just show nauseated so I can see where I'm hunting for things. Okay, so here's our bottom row, and I'm gonna need to figure out some way to handle these such that when I add new things, it's not gonna be the worst in the world to fight with this. Also, I think I want to put the more common ones on the left-hand side, and then the less and less common ones further right or up in that second row. So I want the potentially life-threatening ones probably in that second row. Just so you know, something's probably really wrong. And remember how I mentioned that if the source color is white, we can tint it. Well, say I want vomiting to be green. You know, maybe a little darker green or something, but there we go. Suddenly, that white sprite has paid off for itself because it already looks nice with whatever coloring I can attach to it just using the material and nothing else. I'm kind of tempted to try coloring all of these, although I don't know if that would work in the long run. Let's get a couple more of these in here and see how well that works. So this is not nauseated, this is going to be sleepy. Or asleep, I guess should be the actual correct term. And I actually want asleep to be the first one that's handled. Not vomiting, but sleepy. And sleepy would not be green. Sleepy would actually probably be white or maybe a light gray or something. Using a bright white in your UI always grabs a lot more attention than you probably want it to. If we wanted to add some color, maybe a slight blue tinge to it, but we don't really want it to get too dark, otherwise it just is going to fall into the UI. So using a light color here works for us. And there's a lot of artwork. It's not a science, there's just a lot of art to making a good UI. That's not to say you can't learn it, it's just to say that it can be a little difficult sometimes to come up with good UI elements. I'd say this green is almost a little too dark, and that we want to lighten it up, but in order to keep it from turning into that lime green, where instead we could desaturate it a little, remove some of the color and make it a little brighter, just so that it's a little less about to jump out. I almost kind of like the pastel colors for having these kind of sit in place. So there's asleep, there's nauseated. Let's just double check real quick what the rest of mine look like. Poisoned and diseased, I definitely want. I think those should be on the top shelf, just to make sure that when they show up, the player kind of goes, uh-oh, crap. So let's poisoned. And that's not going to be that. That's actually going to be the leaky skull. And poison is also kind of a green thing, but we can go with a grosser, darker green maybe, just to differentiate it. Now you'll note that this is fully saturated, but I'm still not going with that full brightness. But it sticks out enough that you can see it from a distance. You know it's there, and you know it's applied to that character. Diseased is also... Diseased is... I can't help but think of it as a green, even though that might not actually be a green. I need to consider that one a little further. But... Diseased. And we know the diseased icon, at least, is going to be this infested heart. This gross, infested mass. I almost kind of am tempted to say like a brown or an orange would do a good job for this. Obviously, we don't want it too dark, but something that kind of properly says, yeah, this is not going to kill you quickly, but it's not going to do you well in the long term either. I think that's really what we're hunting for with diseased as a condition. I'm actually going to shift this one over a little further. There we go. Because what I want in this space... Oh, come on. I said copy and paste. I have a bad feeling I'm like making things somewhere else in the... Really? Is it not going to let me... There we go. Okay. So this shouldn't be in sleep. This should be encumbered. And that is our back pain. Which that is actually pretty vanilla in comparison to everything else that could be going on here. So I'm kind of tempted to shift places here. Dunk this one first in line just because it's not really all that terrible. In fact, if anything, it's just going to be kind of a gray. Maybe slight amounts of red, so you know it's obviously not good. Well, I think the icon makes it pretty obvious it's not good, huh? Asleep, can we add some more blue to that? I kind of want a little more color. Just so that the player knows that these are not good things that are happening to them. I'm just looking at spacing here, trying to figure out how I want these to look and work. That's also another part of this, is figuring out how close or far apart we want these things to be. And keep in mind, I say stoned, I mean not literally high as a kite, but this character is turned to stone. So a gray is actually really good for this one. The problem is we need to make sure that this thing has some kind of highlight or way to mark that it's there. Because I want to make it dark, but at the same time, I want to make sure that the thing is obvious in the scene. So what I'm going to try and do, and I don't know how well this is going to work, oh, whoops, shadow. Wrong one. That's not the one I wanted at all. I was wondering why it was only generating one copy of things. I was like, this doesn't look right at all. No, it's because it was the wrong one. I'm actually not sure how I feel about that. I kind of like the two colors here, but I'm having some trouble with the original. That kind of looks stone colored though. Alright, let's keep moving on. What else do we got? We have Blind, Insane. Charmed is on the list, although I haven't messed with it yet. Blind is definitely one of the, what I would consider the worst ones to have a character succumb to. So let's keep that on the top row. Maybe not so far over, but definitely still top row material. Get some red in here. I know I haven't used red yet for any of these, but this seems like an appropriate one for red. Mental's asking, has anyone had the moment when you play a game and then start thinking how devs implemented some features code-wise? So when you're a game programmer, that's kind of an all-the-time thing. It's like being a movie critic and watching a movie for fun instead of to criticize it. You can't help but wonder or think at how certain things are implemented. When I look at shadows in any game, I can pretty much immediately tell you some of the implementation details of that shadowing system because they just all tend to have their quirks. If you look at it and you see the soft edges, you kind of go, okay, that was shadow mapped using a soft edge shadow. Or, oh, hey, they used shadow mapping, but this is a hard edged shadow in this shader instead of a soft edge. Or, hey, these guys used convex holes, or they used whatever representation, and it becomes obvious very quickly to somebody who works in the game industry. It's just kind of a curse. You look at it and you go, oh yeah, I know how they do that. That may or may not actually be the case of how they did it, but you can take a decent guess at it pretty immediately. Let's see here. I kind of want a purple for Insane. Just because that or maybe another yellow. But I'd want a purer yellow for that. Ooh, I kind of like the orange. Maybe add a little yellow back in, but keep it that orange color just for the creepy factor. That I like. Okay, Charmed. I actually don't have an image for Charmed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I've got 8. So yeah, the only one I'm really missing is Charmed right now. And for now, I think these are fine. Especially considering, like, dead is kind of a thing, but it's not an icon that we need to take care of. And the reason, you'll notice that I switched some stuff to being prefabs. The reason I have these turned into prefabs is because they're used in multiple scenes, therefore, the multiple scenes makes it difficult to keep the objects synced up between the scenes. So in order to make sure that they all have the same elements all the time, it was easier to dump that into a prefab and take care of it then. Shouldn't Insane be in the top row, considering the character will stop doing what you asked it? True, yeah, so the top row is a lot more, they're not permanent, but they're longer term effects, versus the bottom row is kind of shorter term stuff. The moment a fight ends, somebody who's insane will come to their senses, versus somebody who is somebody who's blinded or who is diseased or poisoned. That may not go away anytime soon. So I'm trying to keep these kind of both by severity and also by the amount of time that the character may or may not spend doing that. So bottom row, I do like being a little shorter term. Yes, somebody may cast an insanity spell or do something that will cause a character to go insane, but it will be for a fairly short term, because if you make a character go insane in the long term, it kind of messes with the aesthetic of how the game feels. If somebody goes crazy for too long, it's hard for the player to generate a story in their own head about how the rest of the party is dealing with this insane character. Mostly because they'd just be too uncooperative, and it wouldn't really be an interesting thing. If we were to play this as a D&D setup, somebody who is insane is just no fun to play with usually. As opposed to if they temporarily go insane, suddenly that's a threat and something interesting happening in the scene. Is Encumbered the same as Paralyzed? No. Encumbered is if you're carrying too much weight. So if your character is got too much stuff in their backpack, it's going to make it hard for them to move. And that's kind of what I was aiming to represent with that. It's not a terrible thing, but it's not great either. I was actually kind of tempted to have it change color from yellow to red based on how much you're carrying, so you can be slightly and very encumbered. Also, just random thought with this. Okay, just a thought. Alright, so I have to get these status effects around to everybody, because you'll notice that only the upper right-hand character has a copy of all these things. And also, since I've got it here, why don't we turn them all off? If only so that when I copy them to each new character, we don't end up needing to recreate all of them at once. Okay, so there's the upper right character now has his. The upper left character has theirs. I'm actually just going to keep going around for each of these characters. Oh, you have status effects now. Great. Oh, you already have status effects. I see. Well, you're going to want these status effects, by the by. Just because they're awesome like that. Alright, last guy. Who already has status effects, so let's just... There we go. Everybody has status effects. I'm going to reapply those changes so that now everybody has access to them in all versions of this game. If I make modifications to it, the only downside is I have to make modifications and then follow up by attaching those modifications to each one of these. I am kind of tempted to turn it into its own prefab, so I just update the prefab and then all 4 of them get new icons. That actually would probably not be a bad idea. Less data that way, at bare minimum. Okay, so we have all these new shiny icons sitting in place. So the next step is to start getting some of these to play nice. Now, Asleep has been here as long as I can remember. You can pass out for any number of reasons. And the one thing we need to do here is to make sure that anybody who is not just asleep during the resting phase, because you'll note that actually if you... Let's see, can I do this? Okay, first off, let's remove vomiting from this poor guy. That should not be your default state, buddy. I'm really sorry about that one. So you notice when they rest, they should be getting sleep icons. They aren't. So that's one thing to mess with. Party... Let's see. Oh, here's the party UI root. And we should be able to just tell it, look, update. Okay, first off, it's just a game object. That's no good. The party UI root, I think, has more information than that attached to it. Or it doesn't. Oh, I know. The information is actually not there. It's with the player characters. They do have an update function, I swear. But the update UI function is actually private. I want to keep that private if possible. So what I'm going to do here... Yeah. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to take conditions, which is... Oh, that's actually within the character class. That's fine. So conditions, while nice, I think I want to set these up slightly differently. So the same way that spend energy is this virtual function that we can mess with, I'd like to do something very similar for conditions. So instead of just check condition, we also want set condition. But we don't just want this to exist as is. We're going to make it virtual so that the player character, when it inherits from character, we can then override it and have some fancy extra behavior kicking in. So we'll say conditions, conditions. And that shouldn't be and equals, that should be or equals. So that's pretty simple, and it may seem like a silly function to write, but what we're going to do is, inside our public functions for player character, we're actually going to have set condition here. I actually don't know which I like more, and I don't know if this is actually something that's even allowed. Yeah, okay, override has to come first. Got it. Cool. So anything that messes with conditions directly actually shouldn't. So this shouldn't be public. This should actually be private. And now all the places where we break that rule, we can now fix it pretty easily. We say pc.checkCondition this. So this is not only going to simplify our code, it's also going to make it prettier. Wait a minute, what was this doing before? It was an or equals? Really? Oh, okay. Yeah, I see what's going on here. Let's see. If you are hit and you are dodging, and t dot... I like how much prettier this is all getting. Can you assign a friend class to a private function of another class? What? A friend class to a... I really... So that friend class can actually... So friend classes are a weird thing in C++. If you use friend classes, there's a chance you might be doing something wrong. Partially because friend classes break the object-oriented notion that C++ exists inside of. There are purists who say you should never use... you should pretty much never ever use friend class. Now, I'm not one of those people, but I can see an iffy reasoning sometimes for using it, and so you have to be very careful about when you do and don't decide to use it. I'm pretty sure I don't know. I really don't know. I need context, and the problem is the context might be way too much code. Let's see. If you are dodging, we're down to 5 errors. Ooh. I need another function. And I didn't notice until now. Character, because set condition doesn't really say remove condition, right? Set condition uses an or, versus remove condition should actually go so far as to use an and. Didn't really think about that. Not the end of the world, because all we have to do is run it through a very similar setup. And note how much cleaner this code looks, right? When I say remove condition dodging, remove condition guard spent. That makes it a lot easier to recognize exactly what's going on, as opposed to fighting with the notion of, okay, wait, now I need to update this, or now I need to not update this. Now I need to do this bitwise operation. It seems silly in comparison. Versus, I say set condition asleep. And that's it. I don't have to do any UI use cases or anything weird like that. What's a friend class? A friend class is a C++ notion that essentially says a class can access the private variables of another class that has marked it as a friend. C# has no such thing. I don't think. Yeah, C# has no equivalent for a friend class. It has friend assemblies, but those are a different beast altogether. Almost done. I'm actually kind of amazed. This says that conditions is not accessible, even though it's private, not protected. That's what this should technically be. Technically, this should not be private. This should be protected. Now, because I like the cleanliness of all this extra code floating around, I'm just going to do that instead. That's something to keep in mind. Okay, cool. Let's see if that actually does the trick. Okay, so I'm still not seeing... Oh, and I know why. When I say update UI, I think I called it asleep. Ta-da! Right, obvious, but still wasn't getting done. I'm actually just going to walk some of these characters into the ground and see if they you can walk a little bit into the fireplace. Because of the way I rotate the camera, I actually rotate into the fireplace slightly. I'll have to clean that up later. Uh-oh. I did not mean to get into a fight, though. I just wanted to walk them into the ground, stamina-wise. So I'm just going to bounce back and forth. Alright, are you going to pass out now? Okay, so one worry right now is that they're not passing out even after they're taking steps that are dropping them to zero. To zero stamina. So, where's my on navigation call? So if you ever walk yourself into the ground, you fall asleep. Ta-da! Nice and simple. I was wondering why that wasn't getting triggered, and now I know. I just wasn't setting the condition. I was allowing their stamina to fall. But I wasn't actually doing anything else about it. Now, the one thing I do want to do is if everybody falls asleep, the party is going to immediately rest until the first person wakes up. Let's see here. I'm actually kind of tempted to say that if you spend energy, anytime you spend energy, yeah, let's just do that instead. I think that's going to be cleaner. So instead of finding every place where a character spends energy and then says, oh, hey, fall on your face, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to find the spend energy function itself and say, hey, each time you spend energy, if your current energy is equal to 0, you fall asleep. And that's that. The greatest of warriors sleep on the road. Yeah, kinda. Or their party members just like carry them around. Sadistic sucks when C++ has so many features that there's dozens of rules on how not to use them. I mean, it's fairly straightforward to do something bad in Python, but in C++ or Ruby, you could be writing cancerous code and not know it until someone with lots of experience says, oh shit, don't do that. Yeah, and that's one of those things that you end up finding out when you just get experience doing things. You just kind of look at it and it seems wrong. Like, yes, it has all these cool features, but another thing to keep in mind is that somebody who is really inexperienced with C++ hopefully will shy away from using those features until they understand how to use them. It's like when you're first learning how to use pointers, you do a lot of crazy, terrifying, scary shit with pointers. Not gonna lie, I don't think there's any person in existence who has ever said, you know what, I think this is going really well, and I know how pointers work after using them the first couple times, right? And pointers are just one of those weird concepts that everybody spends a fair bit of time understanding, and knowing how to manage your memory is really a big thing. So, at least with a lot of the crazier C++ stuff, hopefully somebody inexperienced won't dive into using a new feature without understanding why. Now that said, C++ is getting pretty bloated. If you look at the changes coming in the next C++ version, it's really, it's getting too far. They're adding things to C++ that is just making it such a monster to use in the first place, that languages like C# look pretty good, not just because they're C-like languages that don't have memory management involved, but also because it doesn't have all these crazy, weird extra features that have been tacked on almost secondhand if you think about how something like a coroutine, how native that is to C# versus trying to do a coroutine-like thing in C++ is really different. It's a much more powerful language, yes, but it also has that low-level downside as well. You really have to do a lot of stuff yourself, or you don't know how things are getting implemented, and that's always scary. So it is a back and forth with C++. I do think that it's a language that needs a complete rewrite at this point, or at least a kind of a facelift, an update on how they handle it. And not just these little like, oh, I'm going to add things to it. No. I'm talking like total redo. Okay, so anytime a player spends energy and their energy hits 0, they fall asleep. So one more thing. If the party all attempts to move and is all unconscious afterwards, they're going to rest. That's it. Like they are just going to rest. If they walk until all of them are unconscious, it's not my fault. I mainly work in Lua, and I've been finding C# to be bloated. Keep in mind that Lua is a scripting language and isn't actually something that can be compiled in any way. C# is going to look a little bloated because there's a lot of stuff that the compiler has to know. Lua, because it's purely interpreted, kind of like JavaScript, is going to look a little cleaner at time to time. At times, I should say. Now, that's always that's not always going to be the case. But still, it's one of those things where you kind of got to keep in mind that sorry, I'm getting distracted trying to work on two things at once. As a scripting language, it's meant to be used differently. It's meant to be less cluttered and more high level and to the point. You're meant to call C# or C++ functions with Lua code. So it's not going to be as powerful. It's going to be a little slower, but because it's purely interpreted, it's also going to look a little cleaner and nicer. Kind of like Python. Python looks gorgeous. Pretty much all Python code looks gorgeous. And that can get compiled down, but it still is meant to be run interpreted for the most part. Let's see. There we go. So what we're doing is we're just setting a flag that says, hey, they're all asleep. And then the moment we find somebody who isn't asleep, we say, oh, they're not actually all asleep. I was lying. That's what this and equals does. It essentially says the first time somebody comes back as false, true and false is false. So all asleep is now false. And then all we have to do is say, if they're all asleep, we start a rest. And I'm just going to make a little helper here that says when you begin resting, we're going to call this function. And this is going to make it easier for us because now the moment we say, by the way, if everyone's asleep, begin rest. And it makes this a lot easier to handle. I also just noticed that this has a lot of differences here that I don't like. So I'm just gonna unify that real quick. That should not be different in any way at all. Okay, guys. As Executron mentions, the time! Yes, it is 9 o'clock. I must be going. I do have a coworker who is on his way to pick me up in his sweet old school Mustang. So I do have to go get the dog ready, get myself ready, and get my butt out the door so that I can be all cold until he arrives. So thank you guys very much for joining me. We now have walking until you pass out, which then forces the entire party to rest. I'm just going to do it real quick. I'm just going to bounce back and forth, kind of vibrate the party till they're all unconscious, just to prove a point and hope that my code works. 3, and here goes the last guy. Plop, and watch how they all rest. And now that they're all rested, hey, guess what? They can continue going. Now, the one thing I do want to do next time is I'm probably actually going to make them not just pass out, but I'm going to make them all forcibly pass out for the full duration of the rest. It'll be a pain in the ass, but it's something I want to do to kind of teach the player a lesson forever forgetting to rest their characters, even on a slightly regular basis. So thank you again, guys. It's been great having you all along. For those of you who haven't done it yet, please hit the follow button. Make sure it's a nice little green heart section so that I can send out more emails when I go online. More of you can see and join me whenever I go online. If you want to make sure you don't miss a thing, go to my Twitter, follow me there. That's the easiest way to make sure that you know when I'm going online. Other than that, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you guys have a great day. Tomorrow, I don't know if I'll be streaming or not, honestly. With this whole... it might be a little too busy for me to be able to get that done. I'm kind of looking at my calendar, and I'm not sure. I will try and do an early morning stream, just because... I definitely would like to get one done. I might even try pushing it later in the day and doing a longer stream, because I think I have the morning to myself here at home. So I might be able to do a nice long 2 or 3 hour dev stream in the morning. So I'll let you guys know. Once again, Twitter will be where I announce that stuff. So if you want to know, follow me there. Thanks again, guys. You've been great. I hear my phone going off. Because you guys are awesome and following me. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm reaching out for that 1,000 follower point. I'm getting there. I'm sitting at about 880-ish. So hopefully, I'm working my way towards that 1,000 point. Hopefully, I'll have a little hope from you guys getting me there. Thanks again. Have a good day. See you tomorrow. Bye.